everyone. Welcome to Collapse Astrology. How is everyone doing out there? Things are pretty heavy, pretty intense right now, and I am not going to lie, in the face of all of that, I'm a little excited to bring you today's video. Even though the subject matter is grim as usual, there is some really, really wild stuff to talk about. We're going to be looking at how the astrology of 2026 impacts Donald Trump and JD Vance. And really, we're going to be talking about Vance a lot more than Trump, because he is really the one that has the biggest deal transits coming up this year. A lot of astrologers are talking about the eclipse in February on Trump's descendant, which is also Vance's descendant, and which we'll get into. But I actually think the real, more visible drama will happen a little later in the year when Vance has some major 10th house activations. Whatever happens, something is going to happen this year. Some very public transformation is going to happen for JD Vance. And it's going to be something to watch, something to get out the popcorn for. I can promise all of us that. If you're new here, hey, I'm Hummingbird. I'm a mundane astrologer with a background in history and politics. And on this channel, we talk about how the long-term astrology corresponds to the compounding crises humanity is facing today. And we try to address the heavy stuff with groundedness and grace. So I want to walk a fine line with this video in particular, given the gravity of what's happening in the world right now and how many human and other lives are in the hands of these two psychopaths that we're going to be discussing. So just a light trigger warning here. Only watch if you are ready for a doomer interpretation of these things. Also, returning viewers will notice I am somewhere new. I'll say a little bit more about that at the end of the video, but yeah, it might be a little while before I figure out my camera and microphone here. So for those of you who notice that kind of thing, the sound is probably not so good, the video quality is not so good. Video quality shouldn't matter since we're going to be looking at charts mostly anyway, but I do not have my full YouTuber setup going on right now, so we'll see if I get that together. Anyway, let's go ahead and get right into it. We are going to start with Donald Trump. And the thing is that for Trump, all of the big deal transits are almost over at this point. The past few years have been major for him, but beyond the eclipses at the beginning of 2026, there's not actually that much coming for him, except something huge, but also possibly invisible for Trump at the end of the year. And I have my theory about how it's all going to manifest, so I will lay it out for you. But before we go there, we need to do a little retrospective and then talk about what's happening for Donald Trump in this moment. Okay, so first for the retrospective. Trump has had Uranus crossing his midheaven over the past couple of years. It was right smack on his midheaven when he won the election. It has also been squaring his Mars over the past couple of years. He has had Venus transiting first his Gemini placements during the election and then his Cancer placements this year. Jupiter was conjunct his Venus-Saturn conjunction around the time that a lot of the Epstein file stuff was coming out. And yeah, when he won the election, Uranus was right on the midheaven and Jupiter was here on his Sun North Node Uranus conjunction. I do want to address quickly my thoughts about, did Donald Trump win the election or did he cheat? I predicted that Trump would win solidly in 2024 based on a lot of things in the astrology. And I personally do not think that he cheated on a large scale in the way that some blue QAnon types probably still maintain even to this day. I do think it's possible that he cheated specifically in Pennsylvania, and channel members, I can't remember if I ever told you my tinfoil hat theory on that, but I think I'll address that maybe in a live stream, a private live stream coming up soon. But there's nothing in the astrology that screams cheating to me. There's nothing hidden basically in the chart for the election, like the actual election chart. It, looks like what I think it was, just a very public win for Trump. And so coming up is the completion of this Uranus transit. Once Uranus moves into Gemini, it will complete this square to his ascendant and his Mars. And the first time that Uranus made this square to this 26-degree Mars was in June of 2025, and it was happening right at the time that the fake country and the United States did the 12-day war with Iran. The second square was just very recently in early January, It was exact right around the time that they were attacking Venezuela. And there's one more exact square to Trump's Mars in March. Then Uranus enters Gemini in April. And for Trump, it doesn't make any other major aspects for several more years. But there is this eclipse coming up in February. And also in terms of what's coming for Trump, my eyes were drawn to a transit that aligns over the month of March into April, which is Saturn, currently in his 7th house, but moving into his 8th house and opposing his 2nd house, Neptune. So when I first heard talk about this eclipse, I was remembering the South Node eclipse at 5 degrees of Sagittarius on May 26, 2021, which was conjunct Joe Biden's ascendant, and I was convinced that this was going to manifest as some big dramatic ending for Biden, some super obvious like mess up that made it so clear he had dementia, basically, that like there was no going back. And actually there was nothing super visible that happened around that time, although I bet that there was some private turning point around his brain health, maybe for his inner circle or something like that went down around that time. So I'm wondering if it might be the same thing for Trump, where this eclipse could manifest in a big decline in his health, but it might not be revealed to the public until later. Especially because the eclipse is at 27 degrees of Aquarius. It's on February 17th. And just a few days later is the conjunction between Saturn and Neptune at the beginning of Aries. You can check out Doomer Astrology 2026, my most recent video before this one, for a lot more on that conjunction, but it would match the astrology if the United States started a war or if there were a false flag operation, something like that around this time. If that happens right at the same time as maybe some rapid health decline for Trump, of course, his administration and his circle wouldn't reveal it right away to the public if they could help it. They would not want to lose control of the narrative in that way, especially the ones driving the international imperial efforts wouldn't, not if they were right in the middle of some big military action. They would do everything they could to stop that. So I'm going to move us forward a little bit. This puts us at March 25th. So here's Saturn at 4 degrees of Aries. It's coming into an opposition with Trump's Neptune in the 2nd, and that peaks on April 2nd, but all throughout the month of March it's applying, and that is actually probably when a lot of the action associated with this alignment will be playing out. So Saturn in the 8th, coming to oppose Neptune in the 2nd, it looks to me like his family arguing over money. With Neptune in the 2nd, that speaks to how it's really unclear how much Donald Trump actually has. We all know that he did all kinds of tax loopholes. He might be a billionaire on paper, but it's very unclear what his actual cash holdings are, his actual value. That has always been dubious. That is Neptune in the 2nd house. And it's in Libra, which can smooth things over, make something nasty look nice. So when you have Saturn moving through the 8th house, maybe he's dead. That is an 8th house theme, but I predict it's more like he's a vegetable. It's giving Howard Hughes, for those of you who know who that is. It's 8th house exploitation. This Saturn is his family working with the inheritance, trying to draw lines and figure out who gets what. Aries is a bunch of selfishness, and Neptune is like, nobody really knows what's there. So yeah, I predict there's like squabbling going on behind the scenes for a few months, and then we'll get into what happens next once I pull up JD's chart. And we'll do that right now, and we'll come back to Trump at the end, because as I mentioned, there is one more big blow, kind of looks like a literal blow coming in for him at the end of the year. But moving on to JD for now. So here is JD Vance and his current transits. For anyone who didn't know, he's got almost the exact same angles as Trump. Both the horizontal and vertical angles are just 2 degrees different from Trump's. So Uranus was crossing his midheaven at the time of the election too, and it's been squaring his ascendant this past year, just like it's been squaring Trump's. And like Trump, Vance also has some Gemini placements in the 10th house, not the Sun or Uranus like Trump, but he's got the North Node, which Trump also has, and Chiron in Gemini in the 10th. And Trump's Gemini placements are later in the sign, so they're not getting aspected by Uranus for another few years, but Uranus is going to be conjunct Vance's North Node and Chiron starting this year and lasting until 2028. This corresponds to the US Uranus return. And we also have Vance's Uranus opposition happening in 2027 to 2028. So we'll break it down piece by piece, but basically this is huge. This is very public, and especially in 2026, this is Vance being called to expand and evolve beyond his comfort zone, to step into a new expression, a new role in the 10th house. Uranus stations at 5 degrees Gemini in September, so it doesn't actually get to a conjunction with Chiron or the opposition to natal Uranus until 2027, and that will be something different. It will also be something public, but probably more of a failure or a scapegoating, while this year will be, I want to say, like a cosmic gas up, an ego pump for Vance. He will feel like he's stepping into his destiny. Jupiter, currently in Cancer, moving into Leo in the middle of the year, is going to be conjunct Vance's Sun and then later his Venus at the same time as a lot of this is playing out in the 12th. And just real quick, actually, let me show you the asteroids in Vance's 12th house. So I've talked about this once or twice. He's got Vesta and Juno in the 12th house stellium, also the Centaur Nessus. And honestly, this stellium could have its own video. It's really dark. It makes me think of a possession, like Les Wexner's Dybbuk, for those very few of you who might get that reference. I think I will have to do a second Vance video because I've never done a full natal chart deep dive on him, and we will not have time for that or the 12th house in this video. There's just a lot in the transits, and we need to keep this somewhat streamlined. So there's this whole other level to Jupiter and Leo for him. This whole other dimension, we'll put that aside. But even just thinking of Jupiter conjunct someone's sun, that is kind of a cosmic gas up, right? So I'll say a little bit more about the 12th house placement later. But let's just start with Uranus conjunct his north node. I'll get there approximately. Here we are. The exact dates of Uranus conjunct Vance's north node are July 10th of this year, and then, of this year, and then November 14th, and then one more time of April 29th, 2027. All right, so in JD Vance, we have another example of a famous person, a person of outsized influence with a north node that is a hungry ghost. What I have found in working with the nodes of lots of clients is that for a lot of normal people, non-famous people, and this includes myself for sure, the north node is an area of the chart that you might feel a little avoidant of or resistant to. You might not be inclined to develop that part of yourself or of your life because you feel kind of awkward there. Like it is not a comfort zone. It's not a strong point. You might not feel like you have a lot of agency there. This is not true for everyone, but I see that manifest much, much more than not for regular people whose charts I look at. But time and again, in celebrity and politician and plutocrat charts, you see a different phenomena, which I think is linked to the traditional Vedic interpretations of the North Node as Rahu, the head of the dragon, and this hungry ghost phenomena, or this head without a body. So you see lots of examples in famous people where the North Node kind of runs away with the whole chart. And Trump has this going on as well. His North Node is in Gemini in the 10th, in his case with the Sun and Uranus. So his career, his 10th house, his public face completely dominates every other part of his chart. I feel like that's not as unusual because of the Sun and Uranus being there. Like even if the North Node wasn't there, that would be a part of his chart that might be running away with everything else. But we do see the shadow Gemini aspect of all of that. He's always been a liar. He's always been extremely deceitful, but he does have this like charisma or charm that appeals to some, broken people. He can talk in a way that does appeal to people. Very two-faced, code switcher, etc. And the Sun being there also speaks to his name being front and center in his branding and the enormous gold letters on his buildings and stuff. So for Vance, the Sun is not up here in the 10th. The Sun is tucked away in the 12th. So the personality and the ego for Vance is a little bit more behind the veil. But to a certain extent already in his career, we can see this North Node beginning to run away with the chart. And I think during this Uranus activation, it's going to happen in a much bigger way than ever before. There's an element of shadow Gemini in the path that Vance has taken so far in his 10th house. First of all, he came up as a writer. That's a Gemini thing. But also the positioning of Hillbilly Elegy was kind of shadow Gemini. He was writing about his people, but separate from them from an Ivy League perspective, kind of dividing himself from them and looking down on them. He was also, at that time, he hadn't really decided like his political allegiances. He hadn't fully sniffed the wind or tuned into where power was accumulating. So he was trying to appeal to liberals or liberal sensibilities and liberal power structures at that time. However, he was also already friends with Peter Thiel, like already embracing kind of a hardcore libertarian philosophy, if not like really fully ideologically, on the right at that time. But he was drawn to Peter Thiel. He would go on to work at Thiel's VC firm after Hillbilly Elegy was published. So you can see that just kind of two-facedness or multi parts of his character. And of course now he's multidimensional even more, I think, in the Shadow Gemini. He plays for a lot of different teams. He tries to portray himself in all kinds of ways to all kinds of people. Since looking at the astrology, I've always said I think him and Trump probably can't stand each other in real life. There's just too much Leo between them. Their egos would just inevitably clash, so they probably don't spend too much time together. But Vance does have to put on one face as subservient to Trump, and I guarantee you there are at least a few people he talks shit about Trump to. But in person and like also in his social media presence and stuff, he has to constantly back up what Trump says. You've got the devout Catholic, you've got the podcast bro, you've got the Appalachian Roots hat he puts on every once in a while when the need arises. And then there's the Peter Thiel acolyte, which is probably closest to his real personality, whatever that might be. Always hard to tell with the sun in the 12th. But I mean, he was chosen by the billionaires for this role. We'll get to that later, but obviously that's something that would really appeal to a Leo sun and somebody who's pretty narcissistic. Now, in terms of the nodes, the North Node represents a growth edge. So it's something that your soul doesn't have very much experience with. And for JD, that is this public, visible space. On a soul level, he is not used to being seen publicly. And it's this multiplicity also, this public story weaving that is new. He doesn't actually have much experience with that. What he is used to is Sagittarius in the 4th. That is faith. And I would say faith and travel or wandering. Trump has this as well, the South Node and Sag in the 4th. And I'm sure there are past lives of being religiously devout and probably nomadic lives as well, lives where there wasn't one solid career or vocation or pursuit of any particular skill, but there was just a following of the faith, probably many past lives in religious cults, probably associated with Christianity, but over the centuries and millennia, there's been many like kind of cults of Christianity, right? And I think just a lot of past life experience of not taking any responsibility for what happens in one's life. Not that that's a Sag thing, but that can be a shadow Sag thing when you just are putting your full faith into something that is outside of you. So I think that there can be a lack of discernment for what reality is on the soul level for Vance and for Trump. Not saying anything that is like a groundbreaking concept, but I do think that that's a way to understand these nodes. I usually say the North Node is the antidote to the South Node, and you have to lean into that growth edge to extract yourself from whatever you need to heal in your karmic past. But in a case like this, it feels like the North Node has just detached itself from the South Node to North Node arc and is just kind of striking out on its own. That's the hungry ghost, or the head without a body, the Rahu phenomenon. Not that it's not influenced by the South Node. Obviously it is, but it doesn't care about healing the karma. It's just running away with all of his. So I hope that makes some kind of sense, or you can at least energetically sense what I'm getting at. But so Uranus is coming through. It's bringing its energy of radicalization, defying of norms, breaking free of limitations to this hungry ghost. It's really about to set it free in a whole new way than what JD has experienced before. So, probably sometime during this transit, he will become president. I actually predict it becomes official in early July, around the time of the Jupiter-Chiron square and the country's 250-year birthday celebration. And I have much more to say, but let's sit with that for a minute because I really do think it's going to happen. A client of mine has connections who work in the Beltway, and she said plenty of non-astrological folks who are clued into the direction of the political currents also think that this is going to happen. And it's 10,000% what the billionaires intended to happen when they chose him as their VP pick and presented him to Trump. There are some crazy podcast clips of Curtis Yarvin from maybe 2023 or early 2024, just saying the whole quiet part out loud, basically mocking Trump's base as losers and, saying that they messed up January 6th and they're incapable of pulling off a real coup, but then saying how a better plan would be to use Trump as a way to get into power and sneak the accelerationist agenda in with him. I've said before, I think Trump is one of the few people in his administration who is not an accelerationist. He does not actually have an end times philosophy, religious or secular. But these billionaires, these end times fascists, to use Naomi Klein and Astor Taylor's term, they want to accelerate the collapse. And they've really been enacting that agenda over the past year. I won't go further down the rabbit hole there. My third Uranus and Gemini video from last July does go a lot deeper into billionaires and dark enlightenment and ayahuasca fascism and all that. If you do want to go on that adventure, you can find that video. I think it's called They Think They're Chosen. But JD Vance was the political pick of these guys who share this accelerationist philosophy. He was their pick of someone to try to get into higher office. Peter Thiel sponsored Vance's 2022 Senate run in Ohio, and that was them testing out their boy. And it worked, and their opportunity to break through to even higher echelons came quickly, and here we are. It was extremely, direct communication on their part, honestly, that all the mega billionaires were right behind Trump at his inauguration. The tip top of the oligarchy pyramid there. They were blatantly saying, we are in charge now. Although Thiel and Yarvin, they weren't there, which is also telling the king cockroaches prefer to stay hidden. So anyway, here we are. The Gemini new moon on June 14th feels significant, conjunct Trump's Gemini stellium. The Jupiter-Chiron square, Jupiter opposite Pluto, the whole month of July will probably be a month of big movement, big corner turns. I get a lot more into that fixed T-square in the Doomer Astrology 2026 video, and I anticipate a turn of events that involve a mistake caused by pride that delivers some kind of blow to the collective soma. Chiron entering Taurus could be a supply chain hit or a public health crisis or a financial crisis. Anyway, Uranus is hanging out conjunct Vance's North Node all summer and through the fall. It never gets more than a degree away until January 2027. So something major will be happening for him. And even if I'm wrong, even if he does not step into the presidency, his 10th house and his destiny will be activated in a big way. His leadership will undergo some kind of a dramatic change, like an acceleration or a phase shift. There's no way it won't. And there's almost no way that it won't be very publicly visible. The other period to look to for JD is August, when Jupiter moves into a conjunction with his sun. So that's exact on August 15th. And like I said, it's kind of another cosmic gas up. Jupiter will be inflating or giving a microphone to this possessed 12th house. The sun in the 12th, I feel like you can see that in JD, kind of the way he's creepy behind the eyes. Not that everyone with the 12th house sun has that, but an evil, possessed 12th house sun, he's a little stoic. It kind of makes me think of the eyes in that meme of him, or in South Park's caricature of him. But make no mistake, he is easily mockable, especially in his current second in command role, but this is an antisocial human. This is not really a person with any empathy at all. I'm not saying that based on the astrology, really. I'm saying that based on my overall read, although the 12th house does have something to do with it. If JD Vance comes to power, it will be worse than Trump, because these guys literally want the world to burn while they escape to their bunkers. That's their fantasy. That's what they jerk off to. They want to completely destroy the state except for the military, and they want to exit to their freedom cities and leave most of the country to devolve into lawlessness while they exploit all the land they can to feed their resource needs. And JD is a part of this crew, part of this philosophy, and if he comes to power, he will move even faster in implementing it. And I know some people might not like hearing that. I know some people are holding in their mind some sort of fantasy, basically, that Trump dies and Vance takes over and like people don't like him as much, or he doesn't have the same cult following as Trump, so people won't follow him, or people will rebel, or, you know, people have these stories that they're telling themselves that like Trump dying will be the end of the dark things. And guys, wake the fuck up. That is not what's happening here. Whether or not Trump dies in 2026, that is not what's happening here. And the more real, the faster we can get real about that, the better. So sorry if that was too direct for anyone, but now's not the time to be placing your hope in something that is completely unrealistic. So how long all of this will take to play out, like what are the timelines here long term with the fall of the American empire, I don't know. There's a lot of different forces interacting with one another, so I have no idea. But with JD, we can say that if there is a cosmic gas up happening in 2026, next year in 2027 there's a big old deflation, an ego blow, something where he ends up being scapegoated or embarrassed or messing up his legacy somehow. So that is Chiron. That's usually how Chiron experiences go. And with this transit happening in the 10th house, it will be very visible. It will also be Vance's Uranus opposition. And that is the classic midlife crisis transit, when you say fuck all to the old path you were on and refuse to be told what to do. So he might go a little maverick, you know, let's say he might push back on the accelerationist agenda even, but whatever he does, it won't really go very well. He will lose a lot of face as the country's leader during a war, during a crisis, perhaps. I could speculate a lot more on what that might look like, how the different factions of the Trump administration might clash, especially as we move through the US Uranus return. And I'm going to save that for a private live stream for channel members coming sometime soon. But I will say, with Chiron so prominent, this is also probably going to be something that he does not see coming. I mean, it's very Chiron in the 10th to be Trump's vice president in general. But Vance is probably going to be hoping that he is past that sort of like embarrassment, because Chiron in the 10th, he's probably experienced it multiple times in his life. And then it's actually going to manifest as something worse for him. Again, that he doesn't see coming. He's going to, you know, think that this cosmic gas up of 2026 is putting him onto a forever path to, you know, whatever he wants, power, money, I don't know. Not that he's going to lose that stuff, but 2027 is going to take him way down. And he is going to be a weak leader, ultimately, especially if he's the leader during a national crisis. And even if he does try to stop the accelerationist agenda, I doubt that he will have any success at that. That is my read. So one other thing, at the end of the year, there is this late Leo stellium between Jupiter and the South Node and Mars. So I'm showing you a chart for November 12th, but actually this alignment is something that plays out until April of 2027. Because of retrogrades, but there's a big kickoff moment, kind of an explosive moment here when they all first come together in mid to late November. So if by some stretch of chance Donald Trump is still in office, this will probably be the transit that takes him out. Trump has this 12th house Mars at 26 degrees of Leo. I have described it as the blind warrior before. It's kind of constantly fighting, but it has no vision, no sense of direction or purpose. So this alignment slams into that Mars. Shout out Wit on Instagram for putting it so perfectly in a comment on my Doomer Astrology post, a big Mars activation happening in the symbolic back of the head of our dear leader. That's what it looks like. So I did a whole video on a medical astrology breakdown for Trump, but basically a heart attack is super aligned with all of this Leo energy, and a stroke is also maybe part of the picture because Uranus will be squaring the ascendant for the final time in the spring. So if some big event goes down, then Uranus can track with strokes in medical astrology. So this transit at the end of the year could be a physical breakdown, could be the end of the end, and or it could be a psychological breakdown. Like he might just really go completely crazy around this time. And for JD, it happens in an almost identical location, conjunct his 12th house Venus instead of Mars. It's also activating just his entire possessed 12th house. It activates through a square this pretty dark, scary Mars at the bottom of his chart. So if he's holding the reins of power at this point, this is a pretty scary moment. Like, this is trigger happy energy. This is narcissistic rage, like throwing a fit type of energy. Really not want to be Usha around this time. Bless her heart and soul. Beyond that, I don't have a specific sense of what's going to happen at this time. In terms of the geopolitical agenda, there are different factions that want different things or want different things prioritized. And if it's something with Iran, that would really resonate with the archetypes because of Leo and the lion being a symbol of the Iranian royalist movement, which is who the West wants to put in power when they do the regime change there. Netanyahu also has that late Leo Mars, the exact same degree as Trump's, but his is in the 9th house, which describes the ruthless, arrogant, chosen people philosophy he ascribes to. I can't see him not acting on that somehow during this stellium. So, extremely dark. Sorry to finish it here, but hopefully you weren't expecting anything else from me. Yeah, that's all I've got. I do feel a little strange making these predictions so directly, and y'all know, like, I usually emphasize that my mundane astrology is about anticipation more than prediction, but I made some real predictions here, and honestly, like, halfway through writing the script, I kind of stopped and I was like, wait, why am I doing this? Like, do I really need to say things so directly? But I asked myself, and somatically, yes, I do. It feels most aligned for me not to tiptoe around what's pretty obvious here. I still could be completely wrong, but I'm not the only person who thinks this, including many non-astrological people, so better to consider the possibility, like, face on, right, than have it sneak up on us. So if you want to go further down the rabbit hole here, I recommend my Uranus and Gemini series. There are 3 videos, and especially the second 2 are relevant to like what might happen after JD Vance becomes president. The second video is about the history of US Uranus returns, and the third one is about the accelerationist agenda. And if you didn't see Doomer Astrology 2026, my most recent video, that gets into the big collective astrology of the year, like the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and the basket or cradle alignment in the summer. So check that out if you haven't. If you made it to the end here, thank you so much for watching. Do hit like, hit subscribe, leave a comment, share this video with friends who might want to be informed about this stuff. All of that is incredibly helpful for the growth of this channel. And if you would like to support even more, you can become a channel member for just $3 a month. You get my undying gratitude, and you also get access to private live streams where I put on my tinfoil hat, which I'm gonna have to make a new one in this new place that I'm at. I didn't bring the old one, but I can do that. Yeah, put on my tinfoil hat and share my weirder theories and deeper analysis. So there will be a special members only live stream sometime in the next few weeks. Keep an eye open for that, members. I have several things I want to share with y'all, actually. All right, that's it for now. Thank you so much. See you next time.